Welcome to Wild Things and Wild Places. We're excited to bring you part 2 of our special coverage from the first annual Wyoming Sportsperson Conservation Forum. In this episode, we continue the fantastic conversation on celebrating our hunting heritage, moderated by Joshua Coursey. Plus, don't miss the short Q&A session with some of the public. We now continue hearing from the first annual Wyoming Sportsperson Conservation Forum.
Every interaction that we have as individual hunters, be it a conversation with your kiddo about why you can't shoot too far, or a conversation with a guided hunter about why they shouldn't take this shot or shouldn't take that one. Hunters in the past committed themselves to restoring wildlife populations that had been destroyed and conserving land that was at risk of nearly unlimited exploitation. Now, having recovered most game species and making good progress in restoring others, our task is turned to ensuring that those species are not unduly impacted by vehicles, by fences, by invasive species, or by the seemingly endless stream of condos and subdivisions that seem to be popping up. We as hunters have to continue to lead. The heritage of the Boone and Crockett Club, in particular, is one of leadership. It's also a voice for all wildlife, not just when we're hunting or on those species that we like to pursue. Our historical success is rooted in our position in society, a position that I'd argue is at risk in a lot of places. Take today's event, for example. We're very thankful to Governor Gordon for bringing us all here together to celebrate our heritage, plan for the future. It's a testament to the state of Wyoming's leadership in this world of conservation. But do you think the same event would be happening in Oregon or in Washington? It's clear that much of the country, though thankfully not here in Wyoming, that hunters no longer own the concept of conservation. The meaning of the word has been blurred, and the part that remains our own is struggling to grow and maintain its renown. One way that we can maintain that position is by continuing to advance our own ethical commitments in the ways that we hunt. In general terms, people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. It's our job to show the rest of the world just how much we care. The challenge of conservation today is the purpose of the Boone and Crockett Club, the shared responsibility of our closest partners and of all conservationists. There's always a way forward if we read the landscape and maneuver accordingly. While we shouldn't be restrained by that history or force ourselves to run the same plays over and over again, we can at least learn a few things from those who came here before us. At a time when wildlife and wild places were abundant, it mattered far less how we hunted. There was little need or room for an ethical approach to hunting. And when wildlife was plentiful, hunting was not for sport, but for survival and for profit. By the late 1800s, unregulated sport and commercial hunting had taken its toll. Wildlife was no longer abundant or even present in all but the furthest reaches of the remaining wilderness. The logical solution was preservation, protection, which may have included an end to hunting. Those closest to the situation had a very different idea. Influential sportsmen who valued the game that they sought and the spirit of the chase stepped forward. Most notably in this world was Theodore Roosevelt, formed his group of friends into the Boone and Crockett Club in 1887 to address the rapid decline of big game populations on a national scale. Their solution at that time was to promote a new system of natural resource use that was rooted in conservation, and they promoted regulated hunting as the foundation for this new system. The mission of that Boone and Crockett Club is the same as it is today: to promote the conservation and management of wildlife, especially of big game and its habitat, to preserve and encourage hunting, and to maintain the highest ethical standards of fair chase and sportsmanship in North America. Conservation was based on the fact that people need and will use natural resources, including wildlife. But this use would now have to be regulated and guided by scientific inquiry. For society to accept this new idea over complete protection, Roosevelt and the club began to promote another new concept, one called fair chase. At that time, members of the Boone and Crockett Club began to distinguish hunters from other sports people. Take, for example, these first lines from the first issue of the magazine Forest and Stream, penned by editor Charles Halleck, who preceded George Burt Grinnell at the helm of that magazine. He explained that the mere act of hunting or fishing did not qualify a person as a true sportsman, saying it's not sufficient that a man should be able to knock over his birds dexterously right and left or cast an inimitable fly. To be a true sportsman, according to Halleck, required a familiarity with the living intelligences that people the woods and the foundations. He went on to write that a practical knowledge of natural history is is of necessity underlying all attainments which combine to make a thorough sportsman. If hunting was going to be allowed to continue at that time, how it was to be conducted and the character of the hunters now mattered. Fair chase became a matter of pride and status. It separated those who hunted for personal reasons from those who hunted for profit, like the commercial market hunters who lacked a similar code of honor. Fair chase became a part of an overall conservation ethic, and it defined a true sports person as one who could kill game, yet use self-restraint and stand guard to ensure that wildlife populations would never be threatened again. Fair chase defined the rules of engagement that elevated sports people to be highly respected members of the community, both for their skills in the field, but also for their long-term commitment to something greater than themselves. We practice fair chase by holding ourselves to a higher standard than the law requires of us. It's rooted in virtue, in duty, and in honor. Continuing to practice fair chase ethics secures hunting by affirming that the respect for the law and honor. Honor itself appears in several tenets of fair chase. If you go on the Boone and Crockett website, you can read all of them for yourself. There's honor in respecting local customs, in a behavior that reflects favorably on all of us as hunters, on wildlife, and on the environment. Honor is not required by law, but is necessary for building credibility. We can beat the challenges that we are facing today on our history alone. We need new methods, respect for new views and cultures, and trust in many new partners. The ethics needed to support professional management of all wildlife include, but are not limited to, three basic forms. Basic ethics, in how we talk, how we get along with other people, and how proper government operates. The land ethic is in how people get along with nature, and our own fair chase ethic, which is how people pursue game wildlife. Fair chase is what separates hunting from simply killing or shooting. It demands restraint and self-reliance. Fair chase allows for lasting memories that hunters can be proud of, provides young hunters with a proper path in hunting and in life more broadly, and meets the expectations of our modern society, the expectations that the rest of the world has for us as people who pursue wildlife. The Boone and Crockett Club believes that ethical choices in hunting are more important today than at any other. Hunters' values, their motivations, and their conduct shape society's opinion of hunting, and our leadership in policy and rules and regulation making on controversial topics that may or may not be directly related to how or when or why we hunt are important. That means leading on eliminating poaching as a harm to wildlife, leading on eliminating toxic chemicals that are affecting wildlife populations. And it means embracing a broader community of wildlife advocates to move our conservation community forward. Today, society's opinion of hunting, for better or for worse, will define our continued ability to hunt in the days, weeks, and generations ahead. And that's really why we're all here today. I look forward to answering your questions, and thank you for having me.
Hunting is and has historically been an incredibly important piece of our heritage and our culture. For many, hunting provides the means for us to connect with natural wildlife resources that have supported us and nourished us since the beginning of time. What do you think some of the biggest risks are facing hunting today, both as a way to support our families, but also as a conservation tool?
Right now, I see one of the biggest things that we're facing is we're facing a lot of diseases. We are facing CWD, hitting our deer population pretty bad right now, and it could get even worse if it hits our elk population too. And with having these diseases and everything, with a family, let's say we have a family that is strictly hunting just for the meat, that's what they need. And they come up and they kill this deer, and then turns out it has CWD. Then they're out of the tag, and they don't have the meat for their family. And that's something that we face.
Christine or Charlie, anything you'd like to add?
Disease was what came to mind first for me also. And I also think there's the apathy that goes along with diseases, particularly like chronic wasting disease. It's been around for a long time. And then I also think at least from the number of publications that I have written for around the country and looked at, is the just hard siloing of hunters and non-hunters. And if it keeps siloing like that, hunting will keep getting chipped away at because we're a really small part of the population. And so there has to be some more of finding common ground among those that carry around bows and rifles and shotguns and those who don't.
Josh, I really appreciate the question, and many things come to mind when we talk about challenges to hunting. But the first for me is we're in the middle of the process right now among the America's Wildlife Conservation Partners, a group of 56 conservation organizations who work together on federal policy making under the convening of the Boone and Crockett Club to build out our agenda for the next administration. We create this document called Wildlife for the 21st Century every 4 years that includes at least 10 recommendations on how the next administration can work in service to sports people and address the issues that we're facing. And those range from threats to funding for wildlife conservation efforts, be that disease or habitat or recruitment. They range from habitat and range management concerns, mitigating the effects of harmful litigation on habitat management projects on federal land and on private land. The issues are nearly endless, but we ought to push each and every lever that we can as a community to address the issues that we're facing as individual hunters as well as in aggregate.
Thank you for that, Charlie. Mitch has made it very clear to me that he had 10 minutes. And I do want to be able to have the opportunity for members of the public to engage with this panel. Are there any questions specific to any of the panelists? I'd be happy to run the mic out directly to you. If anybody had a question specific to anything that you wanted to ask.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Mike Brain. I live over at Quebec. This could be for a Boone and Crockett representative or either of the other panelists. How do you see the consequences of drone use and other methods of projecting human presence into the wilderness without using the sweat ethic? Growing up in Wyoming, I think we're all comfortable with the notion that riding a horse 30 miles is not an unalloyed blessing, and it fits in real well with fair chase principles. But when you have the ability to project surveillance and guide where you're going, that strikes me as a real challenge. And four-wheelers are a benefit for some things. They're also a challenge, I would imagine, if you're working for game and fish and trying to accomplish conservation in areas where you just don't expect to see people. And there they are. So I'd appreciate any thoughts or perspectives you guys can offer.
I appreciate the question. Fair chase is, as I mentioned, about honor, but it's also about restraint. It's about holding yourself to a standard that is above what the law requires of us. The Boone and Crockett Club has a statement of fair chase in what's required of hunters who want to enter a trophy into our records program. But more broadly, fair chase is unique to each individual person. It's an ethic that we all carry into the field. And when we think about restraining ourselves in certain ways, for some people it means that they only hunt with traditional archery equipment. For others it means that they won't ride a horse. And the challenges only increase as many of these companies continue to develop products that make finding wildlife and killing animals easier. But it's up to us as individuals to hold ourselves to a certain standard when we are in the field and to hunt your own fair chase. I'll note that the Boone and Crockett Club is working towards in the next fiscal year hosting a summit with many of the companies that are producing these new tools to talk about the implications of fair chase hunting with many of these products in the market. There's no opposition to having these new tools or to be able to shoot further or find game more easily. We just want to make sure that these products are being used appropriately when we're in the field and that we're giving wildlife ample chance to escape and that the chase is fair each and every time.
This question goes to, it may be not just fair chase, but it's also understanding population dynamics and what the sort of ethical posture a hunter needs to have to understand how many males to cull versus how many females and how to really get an appreciation of population. I guess what I'm saying, should a hunter be aware if they're going in the field? And is it just appropriate to hunt the biggest head every single time? Or should there be some consideration about what population dynamics are?
Absolutely. Hunting is a pursuit of many of us personally, but it's also a tool that wildlife managers use to manage populations, not only manage the number of, let's say, elk on the landscape, but also where they live and where they're causing impacts. And often a very appropriate management tool to deploy, especially as we find ourselves consistently having the problem of too many elk in the wrong place or not enough elk in the right place. And so that certainly folds into a fair chase hunting ethic. That said, wildlife management is different than hunting, and there's a different standard for folks who are conducting management actions versus pursuing a fair chase hunt. Thank you, Governor Gordon.
I also will just add real quick that from lots of conversations with hunters, I think there can often be, people have these notions that they grow with shooting. We don't want to shoot cows, or we certainly don't want to shoot does because they're the reproducing members of the population. And so we don't want to shoot those. And then when there's proposals to hunt the females, there's some apprehension to that. We want buck ratios to be 40 to 100 or something to keep these buck ratios high. So we have a lot of males. And I think that it's worth sitting down with game and fish biologists and really digging into why there are regulations being proposed the way they are. I think there tends to sometimes be a knee-jerk reaction to things, and that if we maybe sat down and said, where are these numbers coming from and how are you coming up with it, that might help us as the hunting public better understand where regulations are coming from and allow us to use our voices more effectively if we still don't agree with it. But I think it's worth sitting down first and trying to understand why herds are managed the way that they are so that we can better help shape where they go.
I think that's absolutely accurate. And as just a final question, but I think you have all recognized that the hunting community, although birds of a feather flock together, we tend to think that everyone within our circle hunts. We know that the demographics of hunters is very small in comparison. And so I ask you, what are you doing to bring a non-hunter to the fold to help grow this army of hunters and sportsmen and sportswomen?
I'll try it. I'll bite. I think, Josh, if I can answer your question a little more broadly, these one-on-one interactions are how we grow the next generation of hunters. And part of the challenges that all recruitment, retention, reactivation programs face, whether they're public or privately funded or what have you, is that there isn't the constant mentorship and assistance of a family member. You cannot buy that kind of mentorship for young folks. And so in my personal sphere, I make a commitment to taking a handful of non-hunters hunting for the first time every year, including my wife. And it continues to grow. And some folks decide that's something that they want to pursue, and others say, yeah, it's not really for me, but I get it now. That's important. I think those individual interactions are the key. And just as we talked about at the beginning, that's how we grow and maintain our social contract with the rest of society. It is showing what our community is all about, telling the rest of the world who we are, and showing people how much we care about what we do.
Food. I think honestly that's a huge part of being an ambassador, right? Of hunting is just come over and I'll serve you something, and they won't be deer tacos that recently had maggot. But that's try this elk steak, try whatever you serve them. I have a lot of non-hunters in my personal life too, and it was years before my mom would eat any game. She'd come over and say, is this wild? It's like, no, Mom, I bought cow for you tonight. But now she does. Now she'll eat game, and she likes it, and she appreciates it. And I think that's something that then leads to really easy conversations that even then, if they're never going to go out in the field with you, it still at least gives them an appreciation and an understanding, and it helps them see how much you value that animal.
I can relate with Christine there. Yeah, food. I've had friends move here from California, and her sister, she was my friend. She wasn't really interested in it, not at all. But she started to grow more and more interested in it, and I started to take her out more, and she's grown a big interest into it. She's brought some of her non-hunter friends towards me and everything, and I've taken them out black bear hunting and just trying to get them involved. You talk about your stories, you share your stories, that kind of thing. People, especially on social media, people look at that stuff. people that are interested in it are going to Google it, and if it's out there, they're going to see it. And it's just another way to connect with out there in the world of those who might be interested.
Full disclosure, I asked that question intentionally, more than anything, to plant a seed within each of us here in the room today, that we recognize the role of stewardship that we have as hunters, the roles of responsibility and what that entails, and that we ask ourselves, each of us, that. I had mentioned earlier to Steve Meadows in the back that this room is full of tremendous intelligence and great minds in this room. We can solve a lot of problems in this room of what's here. It's your friend from California. She would let others know Wyoming is closed from her state. That would probably be well received. But honestly, what are we doing to bring a non-hunter to the fold? That takes an individual effort, that takes an action item of ourselves, and would we each know somebody that doesn't hunt? And what can be gained by that experience to be intimately involved with our wildlife and our natural resources in the field? I truly hold on to memories made in the field more than any other memory made, as the loved ones that I share, and even those that aren't here. I think if we set that goal in front of us to bring someone to a fold, to share these experiences, I think it'll grow like wildfire. And this hunting community that we have requires such a focused effort. So with that, please give the panelists a round of applause.
Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of our coverage of the first annual Wyoming Sportsperson Conservation Forum. Be sure to look for news on next year's event, tentatively set for May 22nd, 2025. And we invite you to stay tuned for our year anniversary episode next week. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild Things and Wild Places and follow the Muley Fanatic Foundation on social media to stay updated on all of our latest episodes and events.